What's up, guys? Today I'm in the shop. I'm going to show you the cool trick I use to remove broken exhaust manifold bolts. And realistically, this trick can be used on almost any broken bolt around the shop. So you're going to start off with something like this. And then when it breaks off, you're going to end up with something like this. And this portion is inside of the head. So what we're going to do is we're going to weld a nut to the stud. It can be broken off flush. It can be broken off inside the head. It doesn't matter. This can still work. So how this works is when you're welding with a MIG welder, the weld will not stick to the aluminum. So you can just weld on here, build up a nice bead, put the nut on, weld the nut onto that, and just keep going until it's on there nice and solid. From there, what you'll do is you'll take a can of PB Blaster and you'll spray the nut while it's still glowing cherry red. What this is going to do is quench the bolt. When you quench it, it's going to do a couple of things. It's going to harden the nut with the stud so it becomes stronger and less likely to break. And also it's going to shrink this bolt a little bit. When you shrink the bolt, it'll make a little more room around the threads and make it a little easier to come out. So let's head out to the shop and check this out. So the first thing you need to do is gain access to it. I like to try to give myself as much room as I can. There's not a lot in these trucks. Fortunately on this one, it's a little bit older one, leaf spring truck, so you can take out the shock mount, inner fender, try to gain as much room as you possibly can and give yourself a little area to work. So once you gain access, the next step is going to be getting the old exhaust manifold off. Use whatever means you have to. I mean, we're going to be extracting these bolts anyway, but I usually like to try to torch off the bolts that connect the manifold to the exhaust pipe, and I like to try to get out as many of the bolts as I can with things like turbo sockets or conventional sockets if I can. Once you get the manifold off, this is usually what you're left with. The stud is too short to get any kind of extractor on, or any kind of pliers or vice grips or anything like that. So this is where this trick really comes into play. I like to use a long pair of needle nose pliers to hold the nut in place. This will keep the heat away from your hands. Make sure you focus in your weld on the stud and not the nut. This will help make sure you get a good bite. Start spraying it with PB Blaster. This is going to create a lot of smoke, so make sure you're in a well-ventilated area. Keep spraying it until it doesn't smoke anymore. You want to make sure you're putting nice, steady, even pressure on the socket. Sometimes you have to work it back and forth a couple of times to get it to go. there you go. Simple as that. Once you get all the broken bolts out, you're going to want to clean up the surface. I like to use little 2-inch resurfacing discs. You just have to be real careful not to take too much material off because that can cause sealing issues. Once you get it all cleaned up, you should have a nice even surface. Sometimes when these trucks have been through a little more as they get a little older, if they're a little pitted, you can use some copper RTV gasket maker, and that'll take up the space. Won't be necessary on this truck, but sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. Well, hopefully that was helpful for you guys. I know we use it at least 2 to 3 times a week around the shop. It definitely makes it easier than having to drill some of these bolts out. It can get pretty tricky drilling a steel bolt out of an aluminum head. We use it at least a couple of times a week, anywhere from manifold bolts to water pump bolts and everything in between. Just remember, just like any other kind of weld, make sure your surface is nice and clean to get the best penetration you possibly can. And remember to be patient. Sometimes the bolt can snap off and you just got to keep working at it. I promise you, if you stay patient, it will come out. If you like what you saw, subscribe, like, and drop a comment on suggestions on what you guys to see next. Thanks for watching.